God wants to teach you how to deal with the mess you got to go through now with respect to what you get to experience in God and Christ in an eternal heaven later. Southwest is safe for you. Welcome home.
Hey Southwest, welcome to In the Word. This is a special night tonight as Pastor Ricky is upstairs preparing to interview Mark Clark, and it is going to be an amazing interview as we finish up our Firm Foundation series, which has been such an amazing series where we have really talked through some fundamental Christian beliefs that helped us be equipped to talk to our friends and family that are wrestling with faith. And if you are one of those online right now watching and saying, man, I still have questions, we want you to know that this Southwest, this church, is a safe place for you to wrestle through whatever questions you have. We want to walk with you as you grow. We want to answer those questions. We don't want to shy away from the hard questions, and either do our people. And that's what I loved so much about this series. My friend, who actually is on staff here, had a family member that was really wrestling with their faith. And it has been such an amazing journey to watch her as she talks to this family member, as she shares her love for Jesus and her love for this person as well. And so she has watched this progress, and it has been amazing. We hope that each of you have stories like that as well. And we want to hear those stories. We want to answer your questions. We just want to be a place where we can talk those things through. So make sure each and every week you're sending in your questions. We have some really fun questions that have come in this last week, and we will get to those questions next week because we want to make sure that we have plenty of time in this interview where Mark and Pastor Ricky are just going to unpack some truths that are from Mark's book. And we're going to wrestle through the end of this series, and it's going to be a phenomenal time for each and every one of us. So we hope that you've invited your friends. If you have not shared this yet, share it on whatever platform you're watching on. Text your friend, text your grandma, text your neighbor, tell them to get on tonight because they are not going to want to miss Mark Clark and Pastor Ricky. It is going to be an amazing night. And of course, as always, we still want to know who you with and where you at. So make sure you put that in the chat because we want to know what's going on in your life and who's joining us this evening. Well, you guys, I know that I am super excited. I'm sure you're super excited. I'm sure you've invited the neighborhood. Let's head on over to this amazing interview, and then I'll catch you at the end.
Hey, in the Word and Southwest Church family. We are so excited about the conversation that we have been looking forward to for weeks now here at Southwest. It is with none other than Pastor Mark Clark of Village Church way up in Vancouver, Canada. But really and truly, he is just a neighbor here in the Coachella Valley. Mark and I have known each other for like 3 years or so. He and his wife, Erin, their kids are dear friends of ours. We've had pizza and chicken together. And you know that we only got one more thing to go, and that's fried catfish, and the sacred trinity will have been completed. But we know that for the last several weeks, our church has been engaged in a conversation that we call the Firm Foundation. And we've just been reappraising quite highly the essentials of the Christian faith and what it looks like for you and I to be equipped well to empower others with the good news of Jesus Christ. It's a ministry that we call apologetics, and we've been going through the deep, big picture questions about the Christian faith and Jesus and the Bible and the relevance and the reliability that is Christianity. And I hope you are blessed in that conversation. Well, a lot of you sent in some questions that we want to get answered for you tonight, and I could find no one better and more prepared for this conversation that we want to have with you tonight than my friend Mark Clark. He's written books. He has done preaching all over the world. And more than anything else, you're just going to love this guy. He's been at our church before. He's at our church again via this digital portal. We're so excited. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark, what's up, Doc? How you doing, bro?
Well, I am doing very well. How are you doing down there?
Man, I'm good, man. You are in snow and rain, and so I'm just glad not to be you.
I know. I'm jealous looking at your Instagrams and seeing you golfing and the beautiful sunshine. It's like, let's go. Let's get this COVID thing out of the way and let's go.
Let's go. And you need to tell Trudeau to let you guys go so you can come down and be with me. Not because I want to see you, but because me and April want to see Erin, which is your better half.
much better half. You know it.
Well, man, you're no stranger to Southwest. You've been down here several times. Love a minister here. You love coming to the desert. But brother, God's just just brought so many more people to our fold over the last several months of this pandemic. So, man, before we even dig deep into the deep, tell us a little bit about you and your family and Village and what God's doing up there. And then I got another question about what you've been writing about that I think is really going to engage our people tonight.
Cool. Yeah. Well, like you said, I got one wife and 3 children, 3 daughters. And we planted a church up here in Vancouver 11 years ago now, which is actually crazy. I was 29. So can you imagine giving the reins to a 29-year-old, Ricky? It's like, I don't know what we were thinking about. So 16 people in my house started this church, and the heart behind it was like, let's try to reach skeptics and people who might already know Jesus, but they're mailing it in, there's nothing going on. And let's try to reach them and inspire them and inform them and preach to a post-Christian culture, which is what we are in Canada, right? I like to say when I speak in the States, we're probably a generation ahead of you guys in regard to secularization and post-Christian, culture. So I come to you from the future, as I like to say.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. So we're up here doing that. And God's been just doing awesome things. And, but 3 daughters. It's a joy. I mean, this season is so interesting, pastoring people, as you know. It's like we didn't get into this. I don't know if anyone knows this. We didn't get into this job because we know much about epidemiology, but all of a sudden I have a degree in it or need one to make pastoral decisions. So, it's been tough because we love people, and that's a face-to-face incarnational thing. And it's been a weird time in that way, but God's been doing cool things through it. And as you know, as you opened with, there's an audience that probably wouldn't have even, been zoning in had this not happened. And so in that way, God's going to use it for his good and his glory. And we're just trying to steward that, the best we can. So.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Dude, you are a gifted writer, and you gave me the privilege to do one of the many endorsements on your last book.
My favorite endorsement you wrote.
It was your favorite. It was the best. That's for sure. But man, for the last several weeks, we've been pubbing that book, getting it into the hands of our people. A lot of folks are really sinking their teeth deeply into what God has called you to write. Tell us about the last book, which really kind of set the stage for your voice, I think, in the public square. And then talk about what happened with the first book and now what you hope to happen with this second book, The Problem of Jesus. Tell us about your writing career, bro.
Yeah, well, it was, it's funny. When I look back, long before I was a preacher, I was probably a writer. Like I grew up, I was going to write screenplays, and I wrote a bunch of screenplays kind of before I became a Christian. That was kind of my world, acting, screenplays, all that. And then became a Christian, started, going to Bible school and more got into the communicating side of it, of preaching and teaching. And to come back and try to, as you well know, because you do academics yourself, when you write, there's a clarifying process that takes place when you're writing more than just blogs or something like real, like you're working on, and just taking academics, bringing it down to the bare essentials, and needing to kind of hone your mental game a little bit in regard to communication. And so I wrote The Problem of God in 2017. It was released. And that was actually a big part of how that ever got published, was because of our friend Larry Osborne. So I had written this. It's actually kind of a funny story. I had written the book was half done, because when you write a book, you kind of give it to a publisher and it's already a quarter written, because they need to read something to bother to publish it.
Sure.
So I write a quarter of this book or half this book. And I got an agent, because everyone told me you have to get an agent or you'll never get published. And I was like, okay. So I get this agent. We start working together. She's like, well, you need more Twitter followers. I'm like, I don't care about how many Twitter followers did Cormac McCarthy have? Just write my book, publish my book.
Paul didn't have followers.
Yeah, it's like, what's going on here? Kierkegaard, you see his Twitter? So finally, the end of the day is I don't really know what happened with her, but she was all about like, yeah, let's do it. And then I think she saw a sermon of mine, and I was maybe a little bit too intense. Like I was yelling and in everyone's face and all jacked up, basically
being
just
Mark
Tuesday.
Clark.
Yeah, just a Tuesday. Right. And she's like, hey man, I don't really like this. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, you're fired. And for the first time in my life, Ricky, she sent me a letter of like our contract was, I was fired. I
didn't know that. That's crazy. Yeah. Okay.
So Larry Osborne calls me up a day later and he says, I don't know if your people actually care about this, but you can cut it later if you want. Larry Osborne calls me up and he says, hey, what do you work? I said, I just got fired by this, agent or whatever. He's like, well, what did you write? And I'm like, well, it's an apologetics book defending the faith, answering the 10 big questions of Christianity, science and sex and hell and exclusivity and hypocrisy and all these, the Bible.
Yep.
And all that.
Yep.
And he says, well, let me read it. So I send it to him. He says, this is a book the post-Christian culture needs.
That's right.
Can I send it directly to the president of Zondervan? I'm like, okay.
Are you
Larry
serious,
Osborne.
Mark? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Larry Osborne gets it on the desk of the president of Zondervan. And Ricky, I'm not joking you. 3 days later, I get an email saying, we want to publish this book. Let us sign a contract. We're going to publish this book. And I'm like, okay. So I do some contract, whatever, and I'm just excited. So I write the book. They published it in 2017, and no one had really heard of me because here I am up in Canada with, no agent and, homeless. And anyway, the book went out into the world and people really loved it and gravitated toward it and started buying multiple copies and sending it to their friends and meeting in pubs and coffee shops and wherever other people meet to talk about the book. And it kind of took off. And so Zondervan said, look, we want to keep you writing these kind of things because they're super helpful for people. So It was like, what's next? And it was like, well, the final chapter of The Problem of God was the problem of Jesus, kind of raising this question about, now we've kind of got some of those issues out of the way. Now what about Jesus? And they said, what if you could extrapolate? So I took 20 years of reading, thinking, preaching about Jesus, and I put it into this book, and I thought, how do I do it in a way that captures the audience of both the skeptic and the believer? So it's a book that brings all of it together. It's C.S. Lewis meets N.T. Wright meets John Polkinghorne meets Jordan Peterson meets Nancy Pearcey meets Lord of the Rings and James Bond. How can the regular Joe learn about this stuff, be inspired by it? How can the skeptic be convinced? How can the believer be informed? And so that's what the book is.
Well, if that was the end zone, bro, you knocked it out of the park. I think I read 4 or 5 chapters to prepare for the endorsement. And usually I read like 2 or 3, and it's like I wait for the book form to come out, then I'll read that.
Sure, it's easier to read it.
I just kept reading your book, because it brought to bear, I think my friend Charlie Dates once called me a benevolent scholar. And his idea was that there's one thing to be a scholar, but it's one thing to be good to the audience that you're trying to communicate to. And when I read The Problem of Jesus, for all of you folks that are getting through the book, and if you haven't ordered it, make sure that you get to Amazon.com and get the book in your hands. What I enjoyed about the book is that, you've heard the expression bringing the cookies and putting them on the low shelf. I felt like what you did, bro, was you got these high-end, delicious cookies that are high on the shelf that normatively people can't reach. But you put them down.
April makes.
Exactly, stuff April makes. But here's the cool thing. There was no loss of quality, no loss of richness and depth, but it was accessible. And that's why our church is diving deep into the book in this conversation that we've been having. Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Well, folks, we're here tonight to get your questions answered as to what it looks like for us to defend the Christian faith, to reach the skeptic, to be empowered, but to also be unleashed on the world that God has given us. Now, Mark, man, you read all the articles. You and Carrie Newhoff are good friends, and he has just, I think, been our number one thought leader this year in the church for all the transitions we've gone through this pandemic. And one of the things all the thinkers say is that the pandemic has literally just increased or sped up those trends that were already taking place, right? And so, we were heading towards a post-Christian America. I think it sped that up. We were getting to this place where the scriptures were increasingly being questioned, and I think that's just been sped up. So saying all that to say, as we emerge in hopefully coming towards the nearing of the end of this pandemic moment that we're in, and we're getting out to the other side as to whatever the new normal is going to be, when we talk about apologetics, defending our faith, bro, with what you see happening in Canada, what you see happening with your relationship to the States, what's at stake for the regular believer that's watching tonight, that's just intrigued about getting some questions answered? What's at stake if the Christian church does not dive deeply into the kind of conversations we're having and the kind of material you're trying to write? What's at stake if we don't do this in this moment?
Yeah, I think, there was this great quote William Lane Craig said years ago. I don't remember if you've read it. You probably have, where he said, basically we can't send our kids to university with plastic swords and rubber shields by just doing, Chubby Bunny and how do you stick a licorice up your nose at youth group. Like, we gotta be able to, and I think that the spirit of that is simply, no matter what age and stage we're at, we still have to defend good ideas. We still have to show Christianity is the best idea in the marketplace of ideas. And we got to be able to, we have to be able to say, look, I don't know what version of this you got. I don't know what version of this you're leaving the church over. Ricky, you and I see this, it's almost a rite of passage for 20 to 25-year-olds to get to a place in their life where they go, I'm leaving the church. I don't like the hypocrisy or, whatever. And we might talk about that tonight. But it's like, we got to make sure that people aren't doing those things, or that the non-Christian world isn't rejecting Christianity on a bad version of it.
Amen.
So let's get the best version of it. Let's make sure we're actually presenting Jesus, not the one of the things I talk about in the book, Ernst Käsemann, who's this German scholar, talked about how in Nazi Germany, the way the Nazis were able to do what they did is they made an un-Jewish Jesus. And that set the tone for what they could do in the context of the Holocaust. And I talk about the idea that Jesus was not a Democrat or a Republican. He wasn't a liberal or conservative. He wasn't a this, and he wasn't all the things that we want to take him, baptize him, and use to affirm our ideology. That's not what he was. He was a first century Jew at a particular moment in a particular time, speaking a particular message to a particular people that had all kinds of implications for them and us. And if we get that world wrong, then we're going to hack what we're presenting to the modern world. So part of this, the first couple chapters are just trying to clear away the bad versions.
That's good.
And just go, let's make sure we're actually looking at Jesus, not Chuck Norris or Tony Robbins or some new age version or whatever. Like,
That's good.
Let's make sure we have the right version of Jesus instead of hijacking him and using him for, and that's dangerous because we never know when we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so, the best we could do is let's get back into the Gospels and let the Jesus of the Gospels kind of come out of it and go, okay, now here's the implication for the modern world. Here's the implication for my own heart. Here's the implication for my family, whatever. So that's, I think, what at stake. I think that's the most important thing. And then everything else is implication. Because if you get Jesus right, it solves a multitude of sins in a sense, right?
Man, that is powerful. I watched this show to this day called the Antiques Roadshow on PBS, because I'm a PBS
my wife
freak.
Watches that, I think.
Well, Aaron is brilliant. And so I watched this show, and I love how someone will think they have something that is original and authentic. And I love the setup because this curator or this expert will say, actually, that's not the real thing. It's a copy. Or it's a veneer. And it was something that they used to protect something that was fake instead of something that was real. And what I hear you saying is that too often we will assume that what we've been handed down is like the original, authentic, antique piece or expression of Christianity. But it's really just my daddy's faith, or my region coming from the South's faith, or this political party's faith in a veneer. But you're saying, man, what's at stake is we have an opportunity to expose to people what is really the heart of who Jesus is, what he's called us to do. I love that. Man, talk to me, bro, about, so just to kind of bring you into the conversation we've been having here at Southwest. Guys, we've been trying to kind of erect 4 pillars upon which our Christian faith stands. And so we said that there is a God. How do you know that God exists? There is a word. How do you know that the Bible is reliable? There is a way. How do you know that Jesus truly offers salvation? And then there's a way that seems right. How do you know what to do with all the other religions? So Mark, that's the conversation we've been having. Talk to me, bro, about what would you say to our people watching tonight? How would you define what a skeptic is? And how would you say, what would you entail that our posture towards a skeptic needs to be for this cultural moment that we're in? So what is a skeptic? What all does that entail? Who is that person? And how am I supposed to show up for that person in my life?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously they come in different sizes and looks and different philosophies. You have some that are proactively antagonistic, toward the Christian faith. And so they have reasons that they don't believe. Mm-hmm. So they'll cite certain scholars and authors and articles that they've read. And so that's one version, and we got to be able to, address that. And then there's the version that's just like, they don't know what they don't know, but they don't really care. Mm-hmm. It's just like run of the mill agnosticism, maybe, where it's just like, I don't know, but hey, want to go out and hang out? And it's like, they've just prioritized other stuff in life, that the question of God is not the thing that they think about. Yeah. They think, my life in front of me, I know I got 80 years, if I'm lucky. Let's talk about 80 years. And your posture is, let's talk about the 80 million and the 80 million after that.
Wow. That's good.
Let's talk about eternal perspective.
Yeah.
Not just living for the weekend or trying to be beautiful or becoming successful or having comfort in life or whatever. It's like Jesus actually wants to stir us up to something else. Are you willing to have deeper conversations than just the conversations that are going on around us and so part of the posture is to almost make them question their questions, question their presuppositions, question maybe even their own shallowness might be too strong a word, but sometimes it is, or sometimes it's a lack of courage. I like to tell people when they show up to the Christmas Eve service that the reason they're not going to believe in Jesus is not because they epistemologically can't figure him out. It's because they're scared of what their coworkers are going to say on Monday. So it's a courage issue. It's a cowardice.
Right.
And would they be willing to explore Jesus even if he messed up their perfect life that they have?
Yeah.
And so you have skeptics who know why they don't believe, and that's a particular kind of conversation. Ones that don't know why they believe. Of course, you have skeptics of other religions, so wide variety. I come from a home of skeptics. I was born and raised that way. So when I'm writing, I know I know exactly what they're gonna.
Yeah.
So because that was me, I know what their rebuttal would be.
Yeah. It's good.
So for I'll just take an example. So, and then of course I put myself in the seat of like, now I'm sitting across from, and I have them in my mind, certain members of family or friends, because, I was the guy smoking weed in the garage one Friday. 2 Fridays later, I give my life to Jesus, and now I'm there doing evangelism. So it's like, okay, let's go. So
right.
I'm still got the munchies, but let's talk about Jesus.
Can I get some Cheetos, please?
Yeah, let's go. Let's go. So
I've heard.
Exactly. Yeah. So I kind of know what people. So the doctrine of hell. It's not really like a doubt in the sense of a skepticism, like you did an art something that makes hell not real. It's not that. It's more a repulsion. You don't like the concept, so you refuse to accept it into your view of the world. Yeah. But the problem with that is sometimes are still the right things to do. As a leader, you've had to fire people down and fire them, but it may be the right thing to do. So there are times when something we can fall into. This is what's super dangerous about our time, even being in our culture right now in 2021. Reject about Christianity, the cultural teleprompter. So all we're doing is reading the kind of, we don't have a military because we'll just hope that America will stand up for us if
we got you.
North Korea gets angry one day.
We got you.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, let's all write. Which set of reading we need to be having with people?
Mark, if I'm the guy who just started going to church in January, and I've got friends that are skeptics, but Mark, you sound real smart, bro. Ricky, you okay? But Mark, you sound real smart, and I'm reading your book, and it's like, oh my gosh. But God's called all of us to stand up and be a voice for the gospel. Bro, what would you say as a pastor to the newbie, to the person who's intimidated by the moment, to the person who's worried about the, if you will, the relevance, the influence, the freedoms of the Christian faith? Man, and I kind of, you know what, you know me, so you know what I'm looking for. Answer this your way, but also remind our people that whatever you call this cultural moment, Christianity has been here before, and God navigated this before. Encourage us as to how he'll navigate it again, especially if you're intimidated by all the things we're throwing out there tonight.
Oh, man. Okay, so this is such an important part of the conversation, because this is what's gonna put steel in our spine. The recognition that Christianity, I was reading this somewhere the other day. Christianity is one of, if not the only faith, Ricky, that geographically moves around the world.
Wow.
Okay, so it began. I'm going to get really macro here to answer your question. Okay.
Do it.
Okay. It began as a Jewish religion in Israel, right? Then it moved to the Roman Empire and Europe. Then it came from Europe over to North America. It really got embedded in North America. But the thing is it's moved now. It's moved away from North America to Latin America. So South America, 3,000 people come to Christ today. It's moved to Asia and Africa. That is now the face of evangelical Christianity.
That's right.
And the reason, I think, is because when Christianity gets into power, it dies, because it flourishes best on the margins. It flourishes
Mark, you
best.
got to say that again.
Okay. When it gets into the seats of power, it dies, because it flourishes best on the margins, among the people with nothing to lose, among the people who aren't vying for power in the classic sense of power. They're saying, so to come back, why I thought about that when you raised this question about your friend is because they got to know that on the one hand, they should study really hard and try to figure out how to best frame Christianity to their friend, you know, to the best of their ability. And people are all different things. But they also have to know that, and I think in this social media time, we all know this, that just convincing your friend to think a particular way isn't actually just showing, hey, this idea and that idea, they'll just come up with 10 other, you cut that monster's head off and 3 more grew up in its place. A skeptical heart is going to just continue to pound you with these questions over and over and over again, which is why we need to, there's an affections level that needs to come out, where it's like, it's not just we reason our way into the kingdom. It's not just we're showing our friend, hey, don't you know, I got cool, pithy little answers to your questions. It's like, it's looking at your friend straight in the eye and going, this is about more than our little argument here. Okay. Because I think what's happened in the political climate is everyone's just sharing their little tweets about my ideas are better than yours. And nobody changes. Like, when's the last time you read a tweet and went, I'm going to change my life? That guy just convinced me. It's like, you know, whatever, you know, it's like, you got to, there's another level that we got to work on. Where, you know, and James K. Smith talks about this a lot in You Are What You Love, where he talks about the idea that ultimate transformation in our life doesn't come about just through cognitive ideas. You actually have to change at a gut level. That's right. You have to change what you love. Right. And when what you love starts to shift and change, man, that's when, you know, life starts to take over. So my point is, your neighbor doesn't only care that Christianity is true. The question to them is, does it work?
Yes. Yeah.
Does it work to change my marriage? Does it work to change me into a better, more loving, more blah, blah? And these are the kinds of things where you're going to go, look, Jesus is the pathway to truly human life. Not just the best answer to a hypothetical, philosophical, ideological question. I'm telling you, he's going to fulfill your longings, the thing that you go after. I'm your friend. And I know that you step on those people's necks at work to get ahead because you worship your own reputation. You worship success. You worship money. You worship getting ahead. Bro, if you have Jesus in your life, you ain't going to do that.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
So I think all of that comes together where it's not just ideas, it's a whole life apologetic almost, a life defense.
Well, Mark, that's rich. I've got a professor, a scholar that you like as well, Kevin Van Hooser out of Trinity Seminary. And Kevin is like a world expert on what he calls pre-evangelism, which is learning how to have the conversation before the conversation we ultimately want to have with our friends and neighbors about Jesus and the hope of the gospel. But Kevin used to just bang into us students that if you don't know how to deal with the questions everyone's thinking before you ever even touch the Bible, you're not even prepared for that conversation you want to have. And so my question is this, man, like, what do you have to say to us Christian folk or those skeptics that are watching tonight about truth? And whether or not it's a postmodern culture, right? So the phrase is popular. What's your truth? What's my truth? And all that good stuff. Settle it once and for all, Mark Clark. Is there a such thing as truth? And is it absolute or not? Because it is a real question in the minds of a lot of people watching tonight.
Yeah. So obviously a multifaceted question because, are we talking about moral truth or, just cultural truth or whatever? But I think the question has to start with, so yes, there is truth. I mean, it's what drives all meaning, all purpose. When you remove the search for truth, history becomes meaningless, life becomes meaningless, everything we do becomes meaningless because it all just becomes a relative conversation. I remember having a conversation with a guy. I think I was actually in Palm Springs on the golf course with this guy. And
you were happy?
I was happy. I was in a good place.
All right. Okay.
And
was that Mastro's night?
I don't know, but that was a good
We
night.
went to Mastro's and this guy paid for us. Trust me, we couldn't afford it, but somebody took us and we ate all kind of, what is it called? What is it, the Japanese steak that they massage the meat? What is it? Wagyu beef in the name of Jesus. Okay, sorry, but that was worth that tangent.
Yeah, it was. So I went and we were talking. He told me he was an accountant or something. We got to talking and he didn't like, ultimately I told him what I did and Jesus, and he said, I don't like the idea that Christianity says it's the only way. Yeah. And I said, well, why not? And he said, because, if it's the only way, that means there's going to be wars and there's going to be bad things. People are going to judge each other and all of that. And I said, well, yeah, but that's not what people do with truth. Is one thing. Just asking the question of whether there is truth is something else. And so I said, there has to be. He said, no, all religions are true. And he had told me he had a daughter. And I said, well, what if your daughter, this is a true story, this is not made up. What if your daughter came home after doing a test and she had 2 + 2 = 5 on her sheet and her teacher marked it wrong? Would you say, oh, don't worry, honey, it's fine because 2 + 2 is 5 to you. And that's what matters. And he actually thought about it because he kind of knew where, the implication of where we were going. And he actually, not a joke, said to me, I would allow her to believe 2 + 2 = 5 because that's what she wants to believe. And I'm like, hey, at this point, we've got to a place as a culture where here's the tension. We are choosing at every moment one of two things. I will either be willing to be uncomfortable in order to try to get to something that might be true and flourishing for society, or I will abandon the search for that in order to be comfortable to get through Thanksgiving dinner. So Uncle Joe says the earth is flat and we've never been to the moon. You have a choice. Yeah. You can either go, I think it's really important that Uncle Joe knows the earth is round. Or you could go, but it's going to start a fight. So I'm going to not say anything and we'll just let Uncle Joe live his life thinking the earth is flat. And we've made that trade. Now, about the earth is being flat, who cares about that? But when we're dealing with, eternal issues, that's not a good trade. We've got to be willing to delve into the truth of a thing, which is why Leslie Newbegin years ago pointed out that there's more atheists in the humanities than there is in the sciences in a university.
That's right.
Because people who are studying math and science and biology and cosmology, they're dealing with like, holy snap, this universe is insane. I mean, this is all this.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It's crazy. All the stuff, the DNA strands that have a language, where did that come from? Did aliens put it there? All this kind of stuff. And then in the humanities, you don't have to ask those questions. Because you're just studying whatever, English lit or something. And you can just talk about and we've moved from, it's kind of that enlightenment to, the romantic period,
So
where
good. That's right.
how you feel and what that has become the definitive priority. So, see, this is what we've moved. We've moved from science to psychology as the popular narrative in our culture. Self-actualization and what you believe about yourself is now the priority of our culture.
Right.
So when that shift happened, it's a fact value split. And what we did is, instead of saying a worldview will be built on facts and values can derive from those, we've said, no, values are now the premise. And your science or philosophy has to come out of your values, which is kind of a really scary, dangerous place to be, because there's people that will abandon certain scientific conclusions because they've already deduced a philosophical thing.
Yep.
I mean, so anyway, all that to say, of course, there's truth, as many philosophers have pointed out. Like, the minute you want to say there's no such thing as truth, you're actually saying that statement is true.
Exactly.
So so it's you're cutting off the branch you're sitting on, and of course that can be true about science, or it can be true about morality. Do we believe? I make this joke oftentimes when I'm speaking in front of people. The minute you're talking to someone who believes in complete moral relativity, like there is no such thing as absolute morals, just give them a little chop to the throat. And then when they say, "Why did you do that?" you say, "Hey, don't put your values on me, bro. This is how I flourish." Why are you letting society project its values about not chopping people on me? I'm me. I'm just, it's my truth. So, obviously this is silly, and it breaks down when society tries to run itself without some basic, like, picture someone, that stoplight right outside Southwest there. So imagine some guy just goes through it, and you're a cop, and you pull him over. You go, "Buddy, you just went through a red." He's like, "Buddy, to me, that's a green."
Yeah, exactly.
Red, green, whatever. It's all the same. It's like, this breaks down at the micro level, and it certainly breaks down in the questions of the existence of God and ultimate things.
Yeah. And so it's given us so many wonderful angles to look at things, especially as we show up for each other in our conversations at the Thanksgiving dinner table. And the guy who's in the cubicle next to us, who's really doesn't have his heart open to the faith. Bro, man, help an old school preacher right now. I'm from the South, right? And so I'm from Mississippi. The South is what we call here the Bible Belt, but Mississippi is the buckle. And one of the things that was thumped into me was Bible, 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 Bible. And our people know that I'm always, in fact, we call this study In the Word, right? Like, it's just all about the Word. But bro, like Andy Stanley says, one of the things that is losing its relevancy and culture is the phrase, the Bible says. Encourage our folks about the Word, bro. Do two things for me. One, how can we rest assured that the Bible is relevant and reliable? But then two, as we show up for skeptics, how do we even use a Bible that they are doubting? What do you say to that?
Yeah. So first off, yes, we can trust it. There's a whole chapter in here on the problem of the Gospels, right? So it's this question, like, can we trust the Gospels that are obviously the biographies that give us Jesus and say, here's who he was? And why can we trust them? Because our culture has basically said they're made up, they're mythologies, they're legends, they're things that everyone just, threw together some ideas. And I talk about all the reasons why you can totally trust the Gospels. The history bears out. They were written super early. I love Lewis's critique. So back, 100, 150 years ago, there were these German scholars that came. Of course, a lot of great ideas come out of Germany. There's very smart people. And in regard to biblical scholarship, a lot came out of, German scholars. And so there was this season where German scholars were saying, the Gospels aren't reliable. They're basically made up fairy tales and mythology, whatever. And what's great about Lewis, when he came from his skepticism as a professor at Oxford, his world was mythology and romance stories. And that's what he did. He wasn't a biblical scholar.
Right.
And he actually points out from the opposite angle, and I talk about this in the book, this great quote where he talks about, it's the fact that these German critics have done nothing but study the Bible their entire life actually makes me not trust them, because when they say this reads like an ancient romance novel. I'm not sure they've ever read one. And he says, I've spent my life reading mythology and romance novels, and I'm using the word romance in the technical, not like the,
Sure.
you know, So romantic comedy or anything, but the big novel. And he says, I now, after a world of reading that for 30 years, 40 years, I come back and I read the Gospels and I realize these are nothing like those. And it's the fact that you're in the weeds reading only that stuff. And you know this, you and I can get so lost in footnotes in the library and the academic world that we don't know how to bring it out and actually think properly. And I love it because Lewis is like, actually, you've never read a romance novel or a true mythology, or else you'd know that the Gospels are nothing like these legends.
Right.
There's nothing at all.
Right.
And so we can trust these things as they present Jesus to us. And so, and the Bible in general. And so I think, you know, that trust of the Bible. And then the other thing about the Bible, to answer the second part of your question, is I came to faith by an encounter with the Bible, right? Like Augustine says, the Bible is the face of God for us now. Isn't that beautiful? Like,
that.
let's just let that wash us. And I believe that there is something about the power. And you know, I've told your people this story before. I went from, you know, I was sitting outside my high school, smoking a pack of cigarettes, reading my New Testament and listening to Jesus at 1 o'clock in the morning outside of my house, telling people about Jesus, reading the Bible. Like, it was the Bible that I started to go, I want to follow the person I'm reading this about. And so we can't underestimate that power among the people that we're talking to, that if they would agree to read the Gospel of Mark with you or the Gospel of John with you, to discuss it, even from a critical vantage point. You know, the word of God never returns back void. You know, that's kind of one of the premises of me and you thinking we're half good at our job is probably not that we're very good at all, but at least God takes what we're doing and does stuff with it.
That's it. Totally.
And so I think there's a power in that. And we shouldn't be intimidated, you know, by that with people. So I think reading our Bible does have a part to play. There may be a time where we got to clear away some of those questions and let people know that, hey, this is trusted. Here's some of the reasons why, and, you know, talk about some of those ideas. And then and then go, hey, let's read it together and see what it does to us.
What do we do with other religions? And I know that's a broad question, but we're in Southern California, giant melting pot. It is offensive to offend, right? Like, offensive is the cardinal sin. And I'm telling you, like, cancel culture is pervasive in 2021. And so many of our folks, man, shudder to even bring up our opinions about other religions and philosophical systems because you'll get canceled, right? So, bro, what encouragement do you have for those of us who have not just a skeptic, but a person who's anti-Jesus and pro another religion? As we show up for them, what's important for us to hold on to?
Well, I think there's a few things. I think, understand what that religion is instead of just kind of, you know, kind of just, you know, never obviously mock it or whatever. Like, if your friend's a Hindu, make sure you know what Hinduism is.
That's good. That's
you know, so that you can actually talk about, you know, so for instance, I one of the stories I tell in the book is the story Francis Schaeffer tells where he's in a philosophical discussion at Oxford one night, and the Hindu scholar, whomever it was, said there's no such difference, because he was a pantheist in some form, between cruelty and non-cruelty. It's all part of the same system. And so Schaeffer takes a hot boiling kettle and he holds it over his head and he says, "Are you sure there's no difference between cruelty and non-cruelty?" And then the guy just kind of goes silent. He walks out of the thing, because part of the thing is, like, we have to figure out what philosophical or theological tenets hold up a particular worldview, and then speak directly to those. So it's not just about saying, you know, hey, Jesus. It's like, okay, Jesus in conversation with what you believe. You know, so Jesus challenges the atheist and says there is a God. He challenges the Muslim and the Jew and says, God is not just a unity. There's a plurality, Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Okay.
He challenges, Eastern philosophy and says, we're not all gods. I am God. And he challenges agnosticism and says that God is knowable. There's this beautiful Jesus in conversation with it all, that once we grasp what his message was, and then once we grasp what the message of those religions is, we can put those two together and see the sparks and begin to hone in on those. Now, usually they actually center around, the identity of Jesus and what he was claiming, But the point is that we need to be able to not be afraid, for the same reason we wouldn't sit around the Thanksgiving dinner table and say everybody, Tozer said the most important thing in our life is what we think about when we think about God. Yeah. That's the definitive question of all of life. And so we have to be willing to have that conversation, without just abandoning it to like, well, they're not going to like me. It's like, well, let's talk about what's true. Now, the other thing that I think Christians have done a poor job of is I think we, how do we put this? Okay, so we live in a pluralistic culture.
Sure.
Right? So we all have different. The problem with Christians is they think that we're trying to create a theocracy again. So let's eliminate all other religions from America. Let's destroy. And here's the mistake we made. We have to fight for cultural pluralism.
Okay. Wow.
But what we have to not fight for, and this is the mistake we make, is when we then lapse into metaphysical pluralism.
And break that down. Bring the cookies on the shelf for that.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so cultural pluralism is going to be, and I think I tell this story in The Problem of God, actually. This is a funny story. So when I'm almost done college, Ricky. So picture yourself, you've written 300 papers, you've spent half your life in the library, you're an academic, you love it, you're teaching college courses, like you're a super smart guy, you know what you're doing. And the guidance counselor comes to you one day. I'm in my last year at Bible college. It says, we've noticed that you're missing one credit from your high school. You need to go back to high school this summer. This is not a joke. This happened to me. Okay. So I go back to high school for a summer. I'm already almost married. Okay. I didn't
know this. That's crazy.
So I go back to high school, and now I'm when I was in high school the first time, I was dumb, but now I'm Doogie Howser, right? Compared to these guys. I mean, I'm Rain Man. So I go in.
And now we have to explain to all my 25 and under who those two people are. But keep going.
That's true. People Google it.
Yeah. Google it, guys. You'll be fine.
So I write this paper, in this class, and everyone hands them in. And of course, these guys have never written a paragraph before, right? I buzz out something overnight, perfectly argued, footnotes, whatever.
Okay.
And this guy is handing the papers out, and he just says, Mark, I need to talk to you. And so I go, he's like, what's your deal? And I was trying to play it cool. I'm like, I'm just one of these guys, and he's like, no, something's up. I'm like, oh, right. So anyway, I told him. So that gave us a summer where we kind of he had this respect for me almost. Now, the thing was, he was so anti-Christian. So what had happened in this classroom is we would debate stuff. He would throw out something. I'd go, actually, and he let me. I wasn't just busting his chops. I was like, actually, no,
Yep.
So anyway, one day I showed up late, and there was this Muslim girl in the class, and I had become friends with her. And we had hung out, and I was trying to love on her, and we'd had some debates about who God was. And I came in late, and she was running out of the classroom crying. And I'm like, she kind of ran into my arms, and I'm like, hey, what's up? And she's crying. And she says, the teacher just destroyed me. And so I said, what do you mean? So I went in, and she told me, he said, I don't even know what the Quran says, which is not something you say to a Muslim, by the way. Or that's good. That's going to be very welcome. And so the point was that he totally, destroyed her faith. So I went into him privately, and I said, I would like you to apologize to her. And I went to bat for her to the point where he then got up and apologized to her. So the point in telling that story is we live in a culture where there are going to be times, and John Stackhouse wrote a great book years ago called Making the Best of It.
Okay.
And if you haven't read it, it's brilliant.
Okay.
It goes through Niebuhr, Lewis, Bonhoeffer, and then the application of all that theology to us as we live in the world. So, and the point is, he says there's going to be moments potentially where when we're fighting for some social issue, we might have to hold hands with a Mormon or a Marxist. But what does that mean when you're trying to bring shalom?
Wow.
So for instance, there's going to be times, Ricky, and you know this culturally, not to be too controversial here,
Sure.
There's going to be times where actually you and the Muslim community are actually, or the Catholic community, you're actually going to agree on, say, pro-life or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you may actually work together.
Mm-hmm.
That's cultural pluralism.
Mm-hmm.
The mistake is when we do metaphysical pluralism, which is this. The Muslim and the Catholic are right in their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing we can't slip into.
Right. Right.
And that's the tension of being in the world, but not of the world.
Right.
That Jesus talks about. And so I think we need to fight for and get a hearing from loving, serving, washing feet of the culture at large. You don't make sure someone's theology and life is in order before you wash their feet, Ricky.
Yep. Yeah.
You know that. Your church is great at that, and they follow your example so well in that. I wish I was half the man you were in regard to the example of that kind of servant of the community. But you don't need to break down everyone's theology to love and serve them and lay down your life.
So good. So good.
But it doesn't mean that then you're affirming everything about their life. And I remember I just read, I don't know if you've read Rosemary Butterfield, much of her, but she has this great book called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. And it's all about how hospitality is the thing that is actually probably the most evangelistic thing that we can have. People, and obviously COVID's kind of blown that up, but but one of the lines, because she was a lesbian, she comes out of the lesbian community and actually loves Jesus and has like a super like conservative theological paradigm now. And she's like, one of the mistakes Christians make is thinking by hanging out with my neighbor of another religion or another sexuality, I'm affirming them in their life.
Right.
And she says, no, you don't understand. The whole idea of, oh, don't worry, I'm just loving the sinner, but I hate the sin. And then she turns it and she says, no, it's love the sinner and hate the sin within yourself.
Wow.
And I was like, what?
Wow.
And it's this beautiful, like, be very careful. You're not creating the self-righteousness because it's your humility and your authenticity that's going to let the gospel be seen and felt.
Glory to God. Wow.
By the people around you. So
wow, dude, you're messing me up in the best way.
Well, she messed me up.
Well, you're calling us to a true Christian faith, meaning of Christ. And so the whole time you're talking, I'm thinking, this is Jesus enveloping into his life a Zacchaeus, which would have been the most culturally poignant, alarming, extremist relationship you could have is with a tax collector, a usurper of the Commonwealth. And man, oh my gosh, I love that cultural pluralism and not metaphysical pluralism. I got to steal that and blog it out. Man, you have been very gracious to give us your time. You're a busy pastor. How many campuses for Village Church now, bro?
I was hoping you were going to ask. Well, here's why
Is it 17, Mark?
I think no. I think it's 7 or 8, 9, depending on how you count. The problem is we're working on two that haven't physically launched because of COVID.
It's so many campuses. He don't even know how many. It's like 27 campuses. He just talking.
It's like 8 or 9. So it's like, but there's one in. So most of them cluster around the Greater Vancouver area, which for your people, you don't even know where a lot of these. Some of them are Canadian. So and then one in Calgary, which is the next province over. And then one in Winnipeg, which is, a province or two over from that. And then one in Toronto, which is 3 or 4 provinces over from that. So, but the Winnipeg and Toronto one haven't launched physically yet because we kind of announced them, found the leaders, found the places, and then COVID. So they've been working on anyway, all that to say, 8.
All that to say that you would extend yourself the way you have to Aaron and to your daughters. If you haven't heard one of Mark's girls sing, check out his Instagram, because he's got some just talented girls at home.
Thank you,
Aaron
brother.
is
I appreciate
the
that.
best.
The best.
We hang out with you because of Aaron. We're still trying to deal with you.
Everybody does.
Yeah,
Everybody
it's just
does.
a thing. But anyways, this guy, with what God's doing with him and his family, then him and his church,
thank you, Ricky. I appreciate
and now
it.
him and his writing, and that he would part ways with some of that invaluable time to pour into us tonight is an awesome blessing.
It's an
brother.
honor, man. It's an honor.
We want to
you
keep the
guys.
conversation going, Southwest, and so if you've got those questions as to how to show up well for the firm foundation that is the Christian faith, email us so we can respond to you. We love you, Pastor Mark. Thank you so much for being with us, bro.
Thank you, Ricky.
I will
Love you
see
guys.
you on the tee shot on the first hole.
On the flip side
in the name of Jesus.
Yes.
When you see
Yes.
what Jesus
Amen.
is doing in my drive now, and what Jesus
Speak
is doing
life.
on my
Come
short
on.
game.
I
and
believe
what-
it. I believe it.
Hey,
Come on.
he's just good. But
Raise it
anyways,
up.
signs and wonders you shall see when you come back
Yes,
down here.
indeed.
Bro,
I
we
love
love you, man. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being with us.
Thanks, brother.
Peace.
Oh my goodness, how amazing was that interview? I hope that you loved it as much as I did. I know that I feel like we should say A. Did you love it, A? Because they sure did love using that. But Mark was amazing. Thank you so much for joining us tonight as we finished up this series. This series has really given us just such a solid foundation. I hope that it has helped you wrestle through some hard questions. I see that as on Facebook, you guys were offering up some more questions, asking some more things. You guys are a great community. I love when you guys chat with each other. If you have questions, do not forget to text those questions in. We have the information here on the screen. We want you to text those questions in. We will get them answered. If we have not answered your question yet, the answers are coming and we will get all of those answered for you. Pastor Mark Clark has wrote another book, The Problem of Jesus. It just came out a couple of weeks ago in the middle of our series, and we want you to be connected to this book as well. If you have read The Problem of God, you will definitely want to read The Problem of Jesus as well. So go on Amazon today, buy this book, read it. Let's continue to have these conversations. Let's continue to wrestle through these hard questions that you have. Continue to submit those. We love to walk with each and every one of you. It has been an amazing evening tonight, and I would love to close you out with our normal prayer this evening. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the light of his countenance shine on each and every one of you and bring you peace this evening. Have an amazing night, and we will see you back next Wednesday.